Well, hey everyone, and welcome to Turning Point, a virtual conversation about pivotal moments for individuals in the ag biological space, sponsored by TerraSym. I'm your host, Rhiannon Branch with Brownfield Ag News, and joining me today is Mr. Aaron Kelley. Aaron, I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Great. Thanks, Rhiannon. Excited to be back here and have the opportunity to talk with you again. Yeah, I am the Vice President for Manufacturing and oversee product development as well with NewLeaf Symbiotics. So hoping we get the chance to talk about that some more today and some of the interesting things we're doing and also generally within the biological space. So.
Yeah, so I want to kind of look at the timeline that got you to where you are today, but real quick, tell us a little bit about where you're located and kind of what all your job entails right now.
Yeah, so I moved to St. Louis to take this exciting role with NewLeaf. That was probably about 3.5 years ago. So yeah, we're based in St. Louis, really an ag hub, and I think that's been a critical location for us, both for ability to attract the right talent and really try to move some of these things forward. So.
And your story that led up to where you are now kind of starts back in
so that's an interesting part too. Thanks for prompting that. I've got, prior to coming to NewLeaf, probably 20 years experience in the biotech industry, but it really was not ag, prior to this for me. I was in what most people would refer to as industrial biotech industry. So industrial enzymes, probably for 16 years of my career, some other time at natural products manufacturer. So really in those roles, you're taking cells and having cells produce a useful product. And what I saw as interesting and exciting in the move to NewLeaf and into agriculture is this shift that was happening within biotech, a new emerging area called microbiomes. And what that really is how all of the small living organisms in and around a larger organism like a plant, like a human even, how those things interact and how that is related to the health of the organism. And really starting to understand, can we take advantage of that? Can we help things be more healthy? Can we help plants yield more product on a consistent basis by taking advantage and trying to make that microbiome or surrounding microorganisms as healthy as possible to help make the plant as healthy as possible.
Yeah, so when we look at turning points, I think it kind of sticks out for you, starting out in college, kind of looking at that chemical engineering side and making that switch.
Yeah, if we go all the way back there, that was an interesting point for me. So I went all the way through for a PhD in chemical engineering, but in my undergrad, I was doing work with some of the traditional chemical companies like Dow Chemical. I worked for DuPont for a summer as well. And while I am still a huge fan of chemistry, I think chemistry does a lot of good things for us in life. I was seeing that maybe there was a different way and some other ways that I wanted to explore things. When I was in manufacturing plants in the chemical industry, they tend to be pretty hazardous and pretty dangerous. You're dealing with some very high temperatures, high pressures, acids and other dangerous compounds. In college, I had started to look a lot at some of the biology and seeing where biochemical reactions can help make some of these things happen in a much safer environment. I mean, almost all biochemistry happens in water, happens at room temperature. And so that led me towards my first job in enzymes, which is really taking advantage of some of these biological catalysts, but really helped push me in that direction and to specialize towards biotechnology in graduate school.
So you might have already answered it in there a little bit, but when we talk to folks now about biologicals, a lot of them can recall a turning point there as well when they first heard about it or first started to believe in it and kind of tell that story of how that went. How was that for you?
Yeah, I may have gotten those out of order for you, but let's go back to that. I do think that's an interesting story. Again, we come back to this microbiome space where I think that's something that really has only been studied in detail and really people starting to understand the importance of that, I guess, over the last 10 years. I'm sure there were people studying it before that, but I think it's become more common. There's a lot more efforts, a lot more both large and small companies studying that. And an example I try to give to help people understand, if you look at the human body, there are 10 times as many microbial cells in and on the human body as there are human cells. And so those organisms play a huge part in your health. And that's absolutely the same for plants. Around the root structure of plants, on the surface of plants, there's even bacteria that live within the plant. So, as this field was emerging, that was definitely an area that I wanted to take my career. And I was kind of looking for the right opportunity for that. And that's where my opportunity with NewLeaf came together. Really an opportunity to help join a smaller startup company that I felt could have a big impact, join the leadership team of that company and help to set some of the strategic direction.
So after making that switch to kind of the ag biological space, what has working with biologicals look like for you since then?
Yeah, so that's interesting in a lot of different directions, I guess. Certainly one of them is being newer to the ag space. There's a lot I've had to learn. How, can we make a product that's going to fit well into a farmer or grower system? If you're too difficult to use, nobody's going to want to use your product, right? And we've had some iterations of that with our Terrasim product, where we've had started with some in-furrow corn product that was just a little bit too difficult to use. And we've made some changes to a planter box application this year that we think is going to have a huge impact and just going to be a lot easier for farmers to utilize.
So do you feel like biologicals themselves are kind of a turning point for agriculture?
I think that's an interesting point as well. Rhizobia have been used for quite a long time. I think that's the one biological that's had quite a bit of recognition. I think a lot more of those biologicals that are now trying to get into the market over the last 5 to 10 years, there's a couple facets to that. I think they're still working hard to gain traction, but I think the technology, biotechnology, is advanced to the point to allow more varied types of organisms to both be discovered, to try to go through what can sometimes be a difficult process to make them into a product. Our organisms are all gram-negative organisms, and those are a little more difficult. They're a little less stable on a shelf. A lot of the early organisms that were put out as biologicals were what are called gram-negative organisms because they form a spore, and those spores are very, very stable. So I think as the technology is developing, it's enabling both a lot more research and discovery to find which organisms are really critical to the health of the plants. And then now the technology advancing to be able to put more of those into a product and put those out in the field.
That's an interesting point. So what you're saying is biologicals to you have been a turning point for ag, but there's still more corners to turn.
I think that's absolutely right. I think there's a lot more being discovered and trying to get into the market, but I still don't think, the majors have all got some products in this space. So it's not to say that they're not around, but I don't think they're as ubiquitous as they're going to be maybe in 5 to 10 years. So I do think there's still some room for the industry to certainly to grow and to put some new technologies out there that are going to make a big difference, I think.
So on that note, Aaron, looking forward here, what do you kind of see for the future of biologicals, or what would you like to see for the future of them, whether that just be for ag in general or, for NewLeaf as a company?
Yeah, maybe I should answer first for NewLeaf and then try to talk more broadly for the industry. I think for NewLeaf, we certainly have tried to tackle what we'd call biostimulant organisms first. So we've got products for corn and soy, some in peanut, and there's a few others, but those are our major ones right now. And there's a few specific reasons for that. One is that the products have shown to yield maybe 3-5% increase in the yield. So for soy, that's 2 bushels an acre or more. For corn, 5.5-6 bushels an acre or more. with a pretty significant win rate, 70% of the time. So those are pretty, significant. But the thing with biostimulants as well is that it's the easier route to market. For a startup, that's pretty important to be able to get something out in the market as quickly as possible. We have some biocontrol products that help protect against some fungal diseases, some that help protect against a corn rootworm disease, but those have to go through a longer regulatory approval process, a couple of years. You need to generate tox data. So those are in the pipeline and will be approved over the next year or two. So I think that's an exciting future direction that NewLeaf and our Terrasym products will be going.
Perfect. And then you mentioned maybe looking at the broader spectrum.
Yeah, the broader industry. I think that's also interesting, right? I certainly, some of the other big things you hear about in the market are a lot of work on nitrogen. That's, Pivot Bio, Join Bio. We work some with Join Bio. So I think that's a really interesting space. There's even some things that Terrasym and our products are doing. So those efforts are really focused at trying to get microorganisms that can fix nitrogen towards crops that normally aren't able to fix nitrogen. So your beans and your legumes are able to do that, but your corn and your wheat cannot. So we apply a lot of nitrogen fertilizer. Can we help to reduce that? We're finding that some of our microorganisms, our M-trophs, can help with what we call nitrogen use efficiency. So we can help with the efficiency of that nitrogen getting to the plant, but our organisms do not innately fix nitrogen. And so those other companies are working on efforts, through genetic modification to try to improve organisms' ability to fix nitrogen and have those interact with those plants as well. So I think that's a really interesting space that the biological industry is going to go towards.
So when you're out talking to people, whether that be the scientists or the farmers, anybody that's maybe new to this space and hasn't quite reached their own turning point in believing in biologicals or wanting to use them yet, what would you tell them? Any advice or ways to kind of get into that pipeline?
Yeah. As I've learned more and more about it the last 3 and 4 years and talking more with growers, seeing how our products perform year in and year out, biologicals is an interesting space from the standpoint of it. While we have pretty high win rates in the 65-70% plus, there are still times that our product don't show an advantage. And some of that is natural variability in agriculture. But the way I like to think of it is a little bit more like insurance, I guess, against trying to optimize the performance of your plant. I think if everything goes well, your plant has a certain genetic capability of a certain yield. And if you're in a good field or whatever, maybe that's 200 plus bushels an acre of corn. But there's going to be years where things aren't perfect, where you didn't get enough rain or other problems like that. And I think that's where biologicals help as kind of an insurance against when things aren't perfect. That biological helps to stimulate the plant, helps the plant to be more healthy, helps it come closer to its biological potential when maybe some of the other parts of the system weren't perfect to enable that.
So I want to take this opportunity, you work a lot with product development. And so we've talked to some NewLeaf folks in the past and maybe touched on this a little bit, but I think you're kind of the key guy to maybe ask a little bit about some of the NewLeaf products, what's working for you guys now, maybe what's in the pipeline for the future, what farmers can be excited about.
Sure. So we touched on earlier, we've had the biostimulants in the marketplace for, this is probably our second big year. We probably had some alpha prototypes out the year before that. So maybe 3 years of data where it's not now your small strip trials. You're now in hundreds and thousands of acres. So you're really getting a lot better data. And so I think some of what we've seen and has helped us evolve in our product approach over that is towards this planter box application. I think we really wanted to find both the right fit for our microorganisms. So if I take a step back from there, we're producing a dry powder that contains live organisms. We've formulated that dry powder to try to be as stable as possible so that it can keep those microorganisms alive and deliver that benefit. our early application methods would then re-slurry all of that. And that can work, but it takes extra steps, right? That's not always as easy an application process for the farmer or grower. Moving towards planter box, most farmers are adding a seed lubricant as they go into plant. And we found that we can fit well into that system as a powder that works well with those seed lubricants, goes on in the same type of application method through the planter box, and that can get us out in the field. And so, this is the first year that we've started to do trials for that. And next year, we're going to launch in a really big way in that planter box space. And we think that's going to be a game changer in allowing us to really access more of the market than we could before. So that's certainly one of the big changes for us. In terms of future products, I think then we start to talk about things like our corn rootworm product, which is something that we're quite excited about. We still probably have another year and a half, I think, of regulatory approval before we could get that onto the market. So that's still a couple years away. But that's shown some really interesting capability. And some of those pests like that, what you see over time is existing technology may start to lose some of its efficacy. So coming out with some products that can take some of that burden that may be harder for pests to develop resistance to, we think we've got some significant things to offer there.
Very good. So lots of things to look forward to, for the 2022 season and beyond. A lot of our farmers right now, maybe not here in Southern Illinois because it's pouring down rain, but a lot of them are smack dab in the middle of harvest. Aaron, what is the harvest season this time of year? What does it mean for you?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. On a practical and company level, this is always a very exciting time for us because every year we've got tons and tons of new trials out that we want to see results for. We want to see what sort of impact we're having both with our existing products and pipeline products. So that's certainly probably the first piece, and all of that data is just starting to roll in for us. So that's really interesting. I think on a personal level, this has always been my favorite time of year because although I didn't grow up on a farm, I grew up around farms because I'm a pretty avid hunter and fisherman. And so, November is a really big month for hunting. So I'm getting ready for duck season to open as well as deer season later in November. So that's another thing I like to see when I see the combines rolling and helping to shake things up and really get us into that autumn season. So.
Oh, I can relate to that. Not only are the combines going through harvesting the crop, but getting the deer out of there too, stirred up and ready for the
that
hunting.
reminds me that, you and I were talking about that in preparation that a couple of years ago, actually on deer season opener, the field that I was hunting, I think it was 2019, the corn was still up because it was a really wet fall and they weren't able to harvest it. And as I hadn't seen much that morning, I was out with both my son and my father. As we were leaving, the farmer was coming in and saying, well, I'm going to get the combines rolling. Maybe you ought to sit there because I'm pretty sure I'm going to kick some deer out. And sure enough, he was right. And I actually managed to take a 10-point that year that the combine had pushed out of the field. So, there's more than one way to partner with your local farmer or grower. And that was a big one for me. So.
Definitely. Well, before we wrap things up, Aaron, is there anything else that you want to touch on in terms of, your job at NewLeaf or, what folks can know or learn about the ag biological space?
Well, I certainly think it's a really exciting time for the biological space. I think there's been, over the last 5 years or so, maybe a lot of products trying to get out in the market. Maybe they hadn't done as much prep work and research as they could have. And in some cases, I think that gave biologicals, I don't know if I want to say a bad name, but maybe not the best start. And I just want to encourage everybody to really take a second look at things because I do think now there's just been a lot more investment, study and research in this area, and the products, including our Terracin products that are coming out now, I think really do have a lot more science behind them, and I think they can do some good things to help push agricultural practices forward. So.
Well, great conversation, Aaron. We appreciate your time, especially knowing that you're out traveling this week. So glad that we could catch you. That wraps up this episode of Turning Point. For those who are interested in learning more about NewLeaf Symbiotics and their TerraSym product, you can go to their website, www.terrasim2022.com. This video will also be available on demand on our website, brownfieldagnews.com. And you all can tune in next Thursday at noon for the next episode of Turning Point. Hope to see you all then.